Pamela Smart was 22 years old and wanted to be someone important. To her students, she was glamorous, the young media coordinator who spoke like she belonged on TV. To her co-workers, she was ambitious, confident, maybe even too polished for small-town New Hampshire. And to her husband, Greg Smart, she was distant, distracted, slipping away. But to one student, a teenager named Billy Flynn, Pamela Smart was something else entirely. She was a fantasy made real, and that fantasy would end in blood. The year was 1990. Derry, New Hampshire. A quiet town where people still left their doors unlocked, where gossip spread faster than the news. Pamela and Greg had been married less than a year. They were young, photogenic, and idealistic. Greg worked at an auto dealership. Pamela was the media coordinator for a local high school, helping students produce their own news programs. To anyone watching from the outside, they were the picture of the American dream. But inside their small condo, cracks were forming. Money was tight. Greg had started hanging out with his old friends again, partying, smoking marijuana, staying out late. Pamela felt ignored, and in her own mind she convinced herself that she deserved more. That's when she met Billy Flynn, a 15-year-old sophomore with long hair, shy eyes, and a quiet crush on his married teacher. Billy worked part-time at a video store, the same one where Pamela often rented tapes. They started talking about music, heavy metal, Guns N' Roses. He was flattered that someone like her even noticed him. And she, a woman who craved control, noticed how easily he looked at her like she was perfect. It started with small compliments, then hugs, then secret meetings. Pamela told Billy she was in a loveless marriage, that Greg didn't understand her, that no one ever did. She made him feel like the only person who could save her. And for a boy barely old enough to drive, those words meant everything. They began meeting in secret, in her car, in hotel rooms, sometimes even in her school office after hours. Friends later said Pamela treated Billy like a boyfriend, not a student. She wrote him letters, told him she loved him, told him she couldn't live without him. But soon the fantasy turned dark, because Pamela wasn't just talking about love anymore. She started talking about death. She told Billy there was no way she could ever divorce Greg, that she'd lose everything, that her husband would ruin her financially and emotionally, that the only way they could be together was if Greg was gone. At first, Billy thought it was a joke, but Pamela kept bringing it up, again and again, until it didn't sound like one anymore. She told him she loved him too much to lose him, that if he really loved her back, he'd do anything for her. Even murder, and in the twisted logic of teenage obsession, Billy believed her. Over the next few weeks, Pamela began to plan Greg's death. She told Billy when Greg would be home. She told him how to get in. She told him to make it look like a robbery. Billy didn't go alone. He brought 3 friends, Patrick Randall, Vance Latham Jr., and Raymond Fowler. All teenagers, all convinced they were part of something bigger, something romantic, something that would prove loyalty. May 1st, 1990, a Tuesday night. It was raining. Greg Smart came home from a night out with friends. He walked into his condo, lights off, quiet, not knowing that Billy and Patrick were waiting inside with a loaded revolver. Minutes later, Greg Smart was dead, shot in the head at point-blank range. Pamela Smart's husband was murdered in his own living room, and the woman who orchestrated it was sitting at home, preparing to play the grieving widow. The killers ransacked the condo to make it look like a burglary. They took the wedding ring off Greg's finger, then they left. Pamela called 911 the next morning. She cried. She said she came home to find the love of her life murdered. Detectives initially believed her. There were no signs of forced entry, no motive, no obvious suspects, just a young widow with perfect hair and a calm voice on television. But Derry was a small town, and small towns talk. Rumors started to swirl. A student claimed Pamela had been too close to Billy Flynn. Others said they'd seen the two together outside of school, holding hands, kissing in a car. When police questioned Pamela, she denied everything. She said Billy was a friend, nothing more. But the detectives weren't convinced. Then came the break they needed. An anonymous tip told police that one of the boys involved, Vance Latham, had been bragging about the murder. They brought him in. and soon everything began to unravel. Vance confessed that he and Billy had killed Greg Smart, and that Pamela Smart had told them to do it. He described how she manipulated Billy, how she convinced him that murder was the only way they could be together. He told police where the gun was, where they'd planned it, and how Pamela had promised to pay them afterward. But without proof, it was her word against theirs. So police set a trap. They used one of Pamela's friends, Cecilia Pierce, a student who had grown suspicious of her. Cecilia agreed to wear a wire. Over several meetings, Pamela unknowingly confessed. Not outright, but enough to seal her fate. She said things like, "If you tell the police, I'll go to jail for the rest of my life." She told Cecilia that the kids had messed up the plan, and that she couldn't believe they were talking about it. Those tapes became the cornerstone of the case. In 1991, the trial of Pamela Smart began, one of the first true crime media sensations of the 1990s. Television crews camped outside the courthouse. Headlines screamed about the sex, the scandal, and the student. And inside, a calm, well-dressed Pamela Smart sat at the defense table, insisting she was innocent. Her lawyers claimed she had been framed, that the boys had killed Greg on their own and were blaming her to get lighter sentences. But the jury didn't buy it. Billy Flynn testified against her. He told the courtroom in haunting detail how she manipulated him with sex and affection, and how she said, "If you love me, you'll do it." He was 16 when he pulled the trigger. Pamela was 22 when she convinced him to. The jury deliberated for 13 hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and being an accomplice to murder. Pamela Smart was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her teenage accomplices, Flynn, Randall, Latham, and Fowler, all pleaded guilty and received reduced sentences in exchange for testimony. Billy Flynn was sentenced to 40 years to life, but eventually released in 2015 after serving 25 years. Pamela Smart remains in prison to this day, still insisting that she never asked anyone to kill her husband. She says she was manipulated, not the manipulator, that the boys acted on their own, that she was naive, not evil. But the tapes tell a different story. Even decades later, prosecutors and detectives still describe her as chillingly calculating, a woman who used emotion as a weapon, words as control, and love as leverage. In interviews, Billy Flynn has expressed remorse. He says he still hears the gunshot in his dreams. He says he was a kid in love with someone who used that love against him. And for those who remember the case, it still serves as a warning about power, manipulation, and the way desire can twist into destruction. Pamela Smart's case became a blueprint for future media coverage of seduction murders. Movies were made, most famously To Die For, starring Nicole Kidman, loosely based on her story. It wasn't just a crime, it was entertainment, a tragedy turned into spectacle. In recent years, Pamela Smart has expressed partial responsibility. In 2024, she wrote a letter admitting she accepts full responsibility for the choices that led to Greg's death. She has applied for commutation multiple times, each one denied. She remains incarcerated at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York, now in her 50s, working as a prison counselor and educator for other inmates. More than 3 decades later, the same questions linger. Was she a cold-blooded manipulator or a deeply damaged woman who lost control of a dangerous game? Maybe it's both. The story of Pamela Smart isn't just about murder. It's about how charisma can blind us, how love can become currency, and how a single person's need for control can destroy everyone in their orbit. Greg Smart's family still visits his grave every year. They remember a young man full of life, robbed of his future, and they say justice, though slow, finally found its way. Pamela's words to Billy still echo through time. "If you love me, you'll do it." Those 7 words sealed her fate and ended an innocent man's life. This is Mason Mysteries, and this was the twisted love triangle of Pamela Smart, a story of seduction, manipulation, and the illusion of love that turned deadly. If this story moved you, share it, not for clicks, but because someone, somewhere, may be caught in a web that looks just like this one. Subscribe to this channel, stay aware, and remember, Every face hides a story, and some hide murder.